We do still need one more member. We've got 3. We need 4 for a quorum.
Well, if I may, this has nothing to do with my presentation, so this feels like a good time to mention. I saw photos from the fireworks display, and I was very sorry to miss it in person, but I was at my own commission meeting, so I know what it's like to give up your evening. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Okay, we do have a quorum now. So I will let Chair Kelly Lean take the meeting away as soon as she's ready.
Okay, Lisa, can you do a screen share with me? I didn't realize I was going to be here tonight, so I'm not prepared. Let's take our roll call, and let's start with Commissioner Fuchs. Okay, you're muted.
I'm here.
All right, and let's see, who else do we have here? Oh, Bruce Moorhead.
I'm present.
Okay, and Kyle Tarbett.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Okay, let's go on to approving our agenda for December 6th and approving our minutes from November 1st. Can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I motion to approve.
Okay, and a second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, let's go on down to our presentations. Looks like we have a presentation from Jonelle McCoy.
I think that's my cue. Lisa, do you mind if I share my presentation then? Okay. Thank you. Let me go ahead and just start, even as I draw my slides up, by saying I am your Main Street specialist. And for those of you who are maybe new to the commission, I think what's important for you to know is that Main Street is a movement and a framework. It is something College Place is already involved in, which we'll talk a little bit about. But I like to start at the top of the hour by just saying, not only are we going to talk about the Main Street approach, so again, it's a framework for doing downtown revitalization, and we'll talk a bit about it. We're also going to explore what it means that College Place is already an affiliate in the network, and then look at the path toward becoming a Main Street community. So that's the designation beyond affiliate, and we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to be eligible for that and your path toward it. So of course, I always feel like the thing to start with is why Main Street? And essentially, I think the answer is because people for the past 40 years have been doing downtown revitalization, and we have been collecting their best practices all along the way. So this was really truly started in 1979 by Mary Means, who was a staff member of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And the National Trust said, go and figure out a way to keep our historic downtown buildings vital. And she said, all right, I'll figure it out. And from that was born the Main Street movement. And essentially, again, it is a collection of best practices for downtown revitalization. So keeping the focus of your community on not only your historic buildings, those that are already built, but on your own cultural history. So what does all of this best practice sort of then mean for you? Well, you are already an affiliate. So that means you have the framework to utilize in your own work, both as commissioners and folks who are going to be pulled into this as volunteers. It's really a scaffold that you can build your own work upon. So you have your downtown comprehensive plan that tells you what your goals are, but this is a framework for how to achieve those goals. It's a network of experts. So you're one of 66 towns and cities that are in the Washington Main Street Network. So that's our state level network, but you're also, through our coordinating program at the state level, connected to folks all across the nation. And there are thousands of folks who are participating across the consecutive 48 in this program. Most importantly, I think it's really a source of information and resources so that you do not have to reinvent the wheel, essentially. I think one of the best things about Main Street is that you can steal with zeal anyone's genius program or project. So whatever you're hoping to accomplish, odds are someone out there has done it or is looking to do the same thing, and you can collaborate. So again, what is Main Street? When I'm talking about best practices, what it's distilled down into are 8 principles of doing the work. So these, I think, are something you might even identify with. Some of these are similar to like the value statements that the city has for doing its work, right? We really want to make sure that we're looking at a solid public-private partnership. So you, of course, want to be and are part of the city's way of interacting with folks, having community-driven government, right? But at the same time, you're looking at what assets you already have. So like, for instance, when the comprehensive plan says you want to continue, like the #1 goal, you want to continue to have your small town community feel, that's, I think, best done by looking with an asset-based lens at community development and economic development to say, what do we already have that we hold dear and can then build off of, rather than trying to bring in some kind of big fish in terms of economic development. Sometimes folks really focus on landing a big industry or partner, but we can look at what's already there and build from it incrementally. So I won't go into each of these, although I absolutely will if you have that as a Q&A, but I think it's more important to press ahead and cover some of the rest of this. And I know I'm not the only thing on your agenda tonight, so I'm going to stay at a pretty steady clip. Those 8 principles are really the values and the approach to these structures. So now we're getting into how does that framework actually look on the ground? For most folks who eventually get to the point of being a designated Main Street, they're already adopting what we call the 4-point committee approach. And that's essentially, again, that way of comprehensively looking at your community and revitalization work and saying, we're going to be considering economic vitality, but we're also going to be considering design. We're also going to be considering outreach. We're also going to be considering promotion. And what do each of those mean, really? Well, it tends to mean that you're working to improve the appearance of everything that is visual in your downtown, or what we kind of work collaboratively to determine your downtown, because I think that's one of your goals as well, as kind of placemaking and creating that sense of what your downtown is. It means telling the community and prospective volunteers, so those partners who you're going to pull in, here's why we care about this work. We're on the Planning Commission, we're already volunteering our time, and we believe in these revitalization efforts. So here's why we think you should care about it as well. Promotion is really cultivating College Place's brand. So I know, one of the things I think goal 3 on the comprehensive downtown plan was that larger economic development strategy. So this kind of goes hand in hand with some of that. You have an overall strategy for the whole of the community, but likewise, your historic core, or what you develop as your Main Street, kind of has a brand unto itself, and promotion really focuses on that. And then economic vitality, easy to guess, it's really focused on supporting within your existing built environment, because again, we're coming from this lens of the greenest building is one that's already built. You have existing assets in your community. How can you increase the use of those assets and also then increase entrepreneurship and economics that are locally based. So growing your own local economy. And I know I'm going at a pretty fast clip, but that's mostly because I want to get to your questions as well. So, okay, we've heard a little bit about the approach and what does it really take to be a successful Main Street. I think it's a really good thing that you have a comprehensive plan that you're already working from, because a shared vision, a really clear shared vision is key. But this will probably mean taking the comprehensive plan that you have and sort of narrowing it down to a vision for your downtown itself more specifically. It also is looking ahead, right? So it's that hopeful, optimistic sort of what will draw people in. It's thinking about what College Place will be in 5, 10, or even 50 years. Engaging with other folks so that there's a clear sense of that and a lot of community buy-in. We definitely, that's something we see again and again is really, really key. And it's grassroots. So of course, you all on the commission are a part of that effort. Any other partners that you would draw in would be a part of that. But essentially, because again, for designated communities, you are tasked with keeping these 4 committees afloat, that takes people power. So having enough of that shared clear vision that engages enough people from the outset so that you're really developing this pipeline of engaged volunteers, that's also really key for success. And then I think really, ultimately, having heart, and that means really caring about your existing assets. So you're looking at College Place through this asset-based lens, like what already exists in College Place that I value? What already exists in College Place that we want to highlight? Looking at your history, your heritage, your own built environment. So I really think that's something that a lot of people come to this table with already, but it is then important to continue to draw out from those of your partners or your volunteers so that it's obvious you're looking at College Place from a space of, here's what we already have, how can we build off of that? So I've talked a little bit about the Main Street approach, and I've talked a little bit about what you have in terms of you're already an affiliate, so you have access to resources, other folks in the network, and the Main Street framework that we talked about. But if you're looking down the road, folks are often thinking it would be sure nice to be a Main Street designated community. And this is something that I thought would be good to focus in on. And I'll provide this PowerPoint slide deck to you after the fact as well, so you can have this for reference. One of the things that's really important to note is, as an affiliate, you can be operating in many different kinds of ways because there's no code that actually governs what an affiliate is. That's something we developed as the state program to help usher folks up to the point of community designation. There is Washington code that dictates what a community is. So in order to be eligible to become a Main Street designated community, you do have to have an independent 501c3 or C6 with the sole mission of revitalizing your historic downtown. So that's pretty big unto itself. You need to work toward having a nonprofit that's solely focused on this work. You also have to develop a comprehensive downtown revitalization strategy. I think that's sort of tied into hopes you already have with the comprehensive plan for the city, but again, what that means is it will include outreach, promotion, design, and economic vitality, those aspects of the Main Street approach we already talked about, as well as having a mission, vision, goals, objectives, all of those things that you would expect a standalone nonprofit to have. So there is this lift that essentially I work with affiliates if this is their goal to create, right? So I'm your support in developing this out. And if only those were the only 2. There are more. So here's something else to keep in mind. Not only do you need a nonprofit with a comprehensive revitalization strategy, but you do have to have staff. And for College Place, well, for anyone with a population of 5,000 or more, that means a full-time staff member. So you have a nonprofit and you have to have at least an executive director. And for you, it would be a full-time staff member. And then this is, I think, one of the really key things I wanted to talk more with you about, because I see some of our work around creating that sense of place and determining what you feel Main Street is for College Place, one of the eligibility criteria is to have 50% of whatever you put in your sort of Main Street boundary, 50% of that infrastructure buildings needs to be 50 years of age or older. And that's simply because, again, this is a historic focus, so preservation focused way of looking at your Main Street area. And then finally, as you can probably guess, you do have to not only have that executive director, but you have to maintain an active board of volunteers. So the board of directors, in collaboration with the executive director, you have to show that you have engaged leadership. So I expect there will be a lot of questions around this, and my hope that I can answer all of those, but I, again, will be providing the slide deck to you so that you can refer to it if you have any follow-up discussion around the eligibility for Main Street designation. From here, I wanted to say, it is, again, my role to support affiliates in your actual work. Like, my joy is coming alongside you and actually trying to move from paper those ideas in the comprehensive comprehensive plan to like downtown work, right? So we actually want to go from those goals that you have to doing visible projects, incubator spaces, placemaking activities, things that you want to actually then be able to point to and say, here is what we mean when we say revitalization efforts. We have tons of information online, including Main Street guides, of which I would say you would probably be, as a commission, want to look at the About Main Street guide, because it goes into depth on everything I've shared and more, and then starting a Main Street down the road, because that will lay out step by step all the things you should consider if you do in fact want to start that nonprofit solely dedicated to downtown revitalization in an effort to move toward that Main Street community designation. So, okay, at this point, I do feel like I've talked a lot, but I like to wrap it up by saying, okay, again, why are we preservation focused and how does this all fit together at the state program level? Well, we are housed within the Washington Trust for Historic Development, which is a statewide nonprofit, but we manage the Washington Main Street program under contract with the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So we have a lot of partners at DAP that we pull in. They also manage the Certified Local Government program, so you're probably familiar with them through that. And so essentially we are counterparts of each other. We focus on downtown revitalization with the Main Street approach, and they're focused on preservation practices and helping you to preserve your historic building stock. All right, now is the portion that I really love, which is, I just want to know, okay, what were you hoping to talk about that we haven't yet? What do you want to clarify or revisit? And especially, what are you still wondering? So I'll go ahead and just pop out of presentation mode so we can look at each other. Happy to go back and revisit slides.
And then I'll just provide a little bit of clarity of this, because the only one that's been in one of these meetings previously actually was Kelly about 3 or 4 years ago. There was some talk about doing a downtown association. The mayor and I wanted to just put it back on the table. Main reason being is that once you do get one of these downtown associations going, that association can then qualify for the B&O tax credits, essentially, where businesses can instead of fully paying the B&O to the state that you would basically pledge it to your qualifying downtown association. And it's a way to keep money you would have paid to the state anyway, local, where it would like help fund storefront improvement grants, community events, things like that. So basically that's how the Walla Walla Downtown Association gets all of it, most of their money, because Banner Bank like pledges a lot of their B&O money over to the Walla Walla Downtown Association, as do several of the businesses in their downtown core. So we could begin to get the information about this. The city has maintained like an affiliate status for the group, but we do plan as we get into next year to try engaging more of the businesses to see if we could get this going, since there's been quite a bit of time that has passed, plus the amount of B&O credit available has actually increased over the past like 4 years too. So that's a little bit of the history behind this before we open it up for questions. It's just a way to keep the money local, that otherwise you end up paying Olympia as businesses.
Hey, John Ellen, Mike, this is Kyle, and I have a question about establishing the nonprofit. I was under the impression that you must be a 501c3 in order to qualify for that tax credit for businesses who contribute to be eligible. Is that true?
That's a really good question. And so separating things out a little bit, the community designation does say in its eligibility, you must be a 501c3 or C6. When it comes to the tax credit incentive program, you, through our state program, can either be a 501c3 or C6, so both are eligible, but will businesses sometimes ask, okay, can I also then claim this on my federal? And that's only true if you're a 501c3 because you're a charitable entity. So when we're talking to Main Street tax credit incentive contributors, sometimes they're wanting to know, can I also claim any of this on my federal as taxable donations?
Understood. And how many of the downtown nonprofits in the state of Washington are 501c6 organizations rather than C3? Do you know?
I don't have a firm number. I can certainly go and grab that for you, but I would say probably not more than a fifth or a sixth of the 36 communities that we currently have designated. So on the flip side, we certainly have probably, if not 4/5 of the communities that are 501c3s. And that's partly, I think, to the funding aspect. 501c6 organizations usually are merchants groups, and they are membership due driven. They are not usually going to be eligible for grant opportunities, whereas 501c3 organizations can spread out their fundraising. They can ask for membership dues, you can establish that, but they can also go out for grants and other opportunities that are more limited if you're a 501c6 entity. Good questions.
Thank you.
So Janelle, when you say you have 36 communities, what's the definition of a community?
Yes, that is very specifically those folks who are all 5 of the eligibility criteria, have applied and have met all 5 of the eligibility criteria laid out in the Washington Code.
But they're cities, in other words.
Cities and towns, but essentially they are
well,
nonprofits,
right,
really separate from, because of course they must, to meet the criteria, develop their own sole nonprofit.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks.
And Walla Walla is one of them, by the way?
Yeah, so taking a look at sort of our near neighbors, Walla Walla is a designated community, Dayton is a designated community, Prosser is a designated community, and then we have a slew of other affiliates in our area. So Grandview is another affiliate. I'm trying to think of who else is real nearby. They're the one that springs to mind, but we do have quite a few neighbors.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is Kelly. I have a question regarding the, you were saying that we needed to have properties that were over 50, both over 50 years old. Do we qualify for that here in College Place? I don't know what percentage we would need of that.
Yeah, and I think Mike can speak to that. My 2 cents in framing it is you do need to make sure whatever boundaries you select, right? Because you are choosing what you consider your main street, that your historic stock is in there. But I think you do have properties, and we can certainly go ahead,
And
Mike,
what
speak to that.
what percentage would we need to have of those properties?
It would need to be within your boundaries, 50% that are 50 years of age or older. And we're looking
I
at the
see.
1970s at this point, being 50 years ago. I know that's crazy,
Okay.
but it's true.
Okay, thank you, Janelle.
And just to add to that, we actually got a grant a couple of years ago where we did an inventory, and the whole College Avenue corridor is around like 60%. So we do qualify for that.
Awesome, awesome. All right, are there any other questions from the board, from the commissioners?
If not, I'll just say that probably over the next year, the mayor and I are going to try and engage a greater business community as long as you think this is all a good idea. Because as I previously said, we're forfeiting quite a bit of money not having one.
Yeah.
So that's why it's getting to a point where it's getting to a point where it's frankly a little ridiculous, because the money that could stay a due program in here is instead going to Olympia for them to do who knows what with.
Yeah.
So that's why we're looking at doing this. And also, once we get a 501c3 established, at least from a program I saw in DAP and Janelle, maybe you could extrapolate a little bit on that. Isn't there some sort of grant program now where like you provide seed funding for executive directors?
Yes, and I will be very transparent with you. Our current funding through the state legislature is only guaranteed through the current biennium. So it's a pilot project, but we will have a round, for example, open again in April, where we will accept applications for folks who are looking, they have their nonprofit and they're looking to hire their very first ever executive director. And we will provide awards up to $40,000 to those grantees from July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. And then we very much are hoping we'll be able to continue to provide that, but it's, to be transparent, only guaranteed right now through the biennium. Well, I expect it is your desire to move on to some other agenda items, and I don't want to keep you, but I do want to mention I am also your near neighbor. I live in Walla Walla, out near the airport, and I love aviation, so I've been out to Martins Field, and I am always coming to the market in the summer to get my fresh produce. So I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you and supporting you as you move forward, however you choose to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janelle. That was very informative.
Thank you all for your time. I will probably get my slide deck to either Mike or Lisa. So yes, or both of you. And then if you have any questions, they also have my contact information. So I'll look forward to that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right. If there's no more discussion on that, let's move on to our ambulance utility discussion with Mr. Carlton and Chief Winter, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll just intro this, and then Chief Winger, maybe if you want to start with going over the stats, and then Brian with the finance question. But we're bringing this up because over the past several years, our call volumes have increased a lot, and I'm not sure all of you know this, but our fire department functions a lot differently than our neighbor to the east. So Walla Walla is a fully career fire department, which means that it's like all full-time people. And College Place is what's called a combination agency, and we've only recently got to a point where we have usually one full timer on each shift. But I mean, the majority of our workforce for those fire calls is actually volunteers. So with that, I will turn it over to the chief.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I know you have a full agenda, so I'll try and keep my remarks fairly short. I'm mainly just the eye candy. Brian is the one that's got all the good information. So I'll just try and get through my portion here. I have lived in our community for over 30 years. It was depressing when she said things from the 70s makes that 50 years old. So that makes me maybe almost 50. But I have seen College Place grow quite a bit in the over 30 years I've been here, and including the growth of the community has also been the growth of the fire department. When I started here in 1990, we went about 135 calls a year. And this year, due to quite a few influences outside of our control, we are going to hit over 1,800 calls this year. And that is a 20% increase in call volume, which is due to changes in law enforcement. Some of that is due to socioeconomic changes in our society and in our community. Not sustainable with our current staffing. And I wish it was, but we are running many days, 12 to 15 calls for service. Many of those are overlapping. And with one person I can guarantee to go to a call, that isn't a good service to our community. And that isn't a good service to taxes and who have lived here their whole lives. They deserve more. So we are proposing to hire one more person per shift so that there are 2 people to run with our volunteers 24 hours a day. Plus there will be some day staff folks here when our volunteers are at work to cover those gaps when people aren't here. There is a way to do this through what we call an ambulance utility. And Brian can go into great detail on how that is calculated. But it gives us an opportunity that says, hey, this is a need that we foresee in our community, and here's a way to fund that and how we can split that up in many different ways to many different of what a billable unit is, and Brian will cover that. Happy to answer any questions now or at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If there's no questions, I'll get in. That's the first sheet I wanted up. Here's a little sheet showing our finances for the fire and EMS. You can see based on that total net cost at the bottom, how year over year we're pretty close to a break even as far as the costs we incur plus the grants and reimbursements we receive. So this doesn't necessarily relate to the volume. So with this additional service requirements in the last year or two, the additional costs that we need to recover are more than the current expense fund can incur. And that's the whole premise behind initiating a ambulance utility, is try to support the fire and EMS with being able to recover some of those additional costs. And you can see that our proposal is to add 4 additional staff, and that is we need to recover at least approximately $440,000 in costs, of which the current expense, which this is funded by, can't endure that in the near term. It can maybe handle 1 or 2 years of it, but realistically, it can't support that level of expenditure, additional expenditure. So the whole idea is to initiate an ambulance utility, and it's allowable under the state RCWs. And the issue that we find is that there are a number of jurisdictions that are currently charging an ambulance utility, you know, and as close as Pasco is. And Walla Walla was looking at implementing and had approved an ambulance utility. And that creates the whole issue of, well, if we're going to charge individuals, how do we go about charging them? And we've gone through rounds of discussions with council as well as internally about what's the fairest and best method of charging this out, and what would the impact be on individuals. So if you can bring up that unit charge sheet. Now, this was what we initially took to council. We're taking additional information to council because they wanted us to research that number 2 option. These are the options that we came up with initially when we were looking at, okay, what impact would be. And the number 1 option was to just charge every customer that has a stormwater account with the city. And there's, you know, just under 3,000 chargeable accounts. So based on that cost allocation from the prior sheet, you can see that the monthly charge comes into about $12.19. And then we were trying to recommend a phased-in approach where 25% current year and so forth up to the 4th year would be the full rate. Now, Walla Walla and other jurisdictions are using the same allocation method. A number of cities within the state just decided for simplicity is to say, this is how many accounts we have. We're going to divide that up by the cost to recover, and that's our chargeable rate. Walla Walla was going to implement a similar plan, and their cost was going to, I believe it was somewhere in the mid $13 per month per customer. But in their analysis, they said they were going to need upwards to $30 a month to recover the costs of their utility. So I don't know if that was going to be a phased-in approach or not, but that's what the cost would be for us to recover our costs. No profit in that or no additional funds, just covering our costs. The second method, what we did is we looked at, okay, well, number 1 doesn't really charge customers based on the use of the service. It was strictly just, this is the number divided equally amongst. So places like nursing homes would only get 1 charge. Walmart would only get 1 charge. Walla Walla University would only get 1 charge, although they do have multiple accounts, so it wouldn't be just 1 charge. So then we thought, okay, well, what's some other alternatives? And the second one was based on our stormwater accounts, and there are 5,241 of those. So that catches up everybody that it basically takes into account units. So if there's one of the inherent problems with this is that unfortunately the stormwater basis uses for big facilities like Walmart and for the high school, they base that unit calculation on permeable soils. So for example, the high school, I believe, had, I don't have that number right in front of me, I believe they had like 400 stormwater units. So they would get a really high rate of charge. And we determined that there wasn't a direct association with the ambulance activity. So, but either way, under that case, if we decided that method of allocation, the monthly charge would be $6.95 per unit account. So if you had multiple stormwater units within your account, you'd get charged that factor. The third method was based on the incident count. And you can see that it uses that incident account. There was 1,429 incidents in 2020. And so there would be the allocation, and you can see who the brunt of the monthly unit charge would be, and that would be the nursing homes, basically based on the number of incidents and the low number of units. So, and you can see that residential, although they do have, between multifamily and single family, they have the largest number of incident counts, but their per unit would be really low. This method for us is hard to calculate, more time consuming, and hard to put into our system to generate. What we are doing is we're taking to council tomorrow night. They asked us to do some more investigation on the second option. We felt option number one really didn't represent, they really didn't charge the groups that were accountable. So what we are doing is we're going to look at identifying what an equivalent unit is as far as a single family. So a single family unit would get charged, if that's the number 695, then that's what they would get charged. And then everything is driven off what's equivalent to a single family residence. So we're going down that method. So we're able to charge places like Walmart. The basis that we're going to be discussing tomorrow is going to be based on an equivalent square footage of a single family residence. So based on our investigations, we determined that the average size of a home in College Place is just under 2,000 square feet. So we're going to use that as the basis for determining how we're going to allocate the cost. So for an example, under Walmart, just let me find my page here. So Walmart's building is 205,000 square feet. So if we divided that out, they would have an equivalent unit of 104 units. And in our analysis tomorrow, we've used a $6 per unit charge just as an estimate, but they would receive a monthly charge of $622. If we had used the stormwater account unit as a basis, they would have significant, I think the cost was double because they have a lot of permeable ground within their parking lots and whatnot. So their units for stormwater basis really wasn't a good method. So that's what we're going to be discussing tomorrow night. And we're going to be recommending that we use a unit cost basis that charges out a better approximation of the different entities within the city, that being single family residents, multi-family apartments. They'll be charged, based on the number of units they have. And then for commercial, churches, schools, public buildings, senior living buildings will be based on a square footage calculation. That's a lot of information, I know. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, this is Kyle. So if we add these 4 full-time folks, does that give us any preparation for the future, or does it just get us up to par with where we need to be on the demand right now?
And Chief Winter will comment.
Is a complicated answer. Very good question, though. I don't have the ability or capacity to take on more than that at once, just because of the supportive cost and workload of my current staff to train those folks up and put them in $500 an outfit and all that type of stuff. I think that this will tide us over for the next 5 years. That's my best guess. I am hoping I don't ever have another year that there's a 20% increase in run volume. Hoping COVID's going away. I hope that law enforcement can go back to calls and that we are going to plateau.
Because a couple of things just to add to this. First of all, a lot of mental health related calls that initially like police used to go to have now shifted over to the fire department. So that has increased it. And the thing I also want to mention, because this has been basically a building issue for a while, is back in 2017, City of Walla Walla, they used to actually do our basic life support ambulance and the advanced life support. Reason we started taking back on our basic life support is because, again, you have to look at the cost drivers. So because every single one of their staffers are full-time and they do not allow volunteers over there, they made a demand of us to pay upwards of 500,000 additional per year, no questions asked, with an inflator. So we took over, we started doing our own ambulance service because there was absolutely no say in essentially Walla Walla's operation. And again, they have much higher cost drivers because it's full-time, whereas ours is that combination model. So essentially, controlling our own sphere here is actually and has been the most cost-effective way to go thus far because their cost drivers are so much higher than ours. However, when you have call volumes of this sort, you're then in between a rock and a hard place because when you're dependent on volunteers, they're good to go out with that staffer, but if you're then having duplicative calls at the same time, you're in a world of hurt, which is now where we face ourselves.
This is Doug. Can you go back to the previous screen? So walk me through that, the categories and the equivalent unit cost again, would you please?
Under which scenario? Or which option?
Well, you're only showing one option, right?
No, there's 3 options there. First option is based on our customer count.
So which option are you going to present to the council tomorrow night?
Well, it's a modified number 2. I didn't provide it because it hasn't been to council yet.
And there's going to be no decision by council tomorrow night. It's only to present options. And basically what we're looking at doing is figuring out what is that unit you're charging against. At first, we were looking at just doing the stormwater. However, that causes disparity because then you have the university and people have large amounts of parking lot, but may not necessarily correlate to call volumes paying a higher share. However, what we're looking under modification is doing it based on like square footage, where you have essentially a square footage for single family, and then there's other breakouts for multifamily and commercial, and that actually has correlated to the deviation of where the calls are landing.
Well, it seems like the stormwater thing, in my viewpoint, doesn't really. I don't know. It's kind of confusing, and it doesn't really pertain to generating an accurate cost methodology.
Well, it's not really a cost methodology. We have the cost figured out. We know we're gonna have to cover that $437,000 in costs somehow.
Well, let
It's
me,
more of what the unit charges to the customer, and a number of jurisdictions within the state are strictly using the number of accounts. The reason we chose stormwater accounts initially was because there are a number of accounts like underwater, and not everybody has water, and then other people don't have sewer, so stormwater seem to collect a majority of the counts. In retrospect, that's not the most accurate method of going around it, so we've changed the philosophy of how we attribute the number of accounts.
so if you're inside the city limits, then the city provides the service, right?
No,
Yes,
yeah,
anybody, we're trying to touch everybody that currently has an account within our utility system. Because we're gonna have to use that system in order to charge this out. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible. Well, not as simple as possible. We're trying to make it reasonable. And just strictly using the number of accounts, regardless of the ones you pick, it doesn't associate well with the ambulance charges. You follow?
Does the city provide service to people that either don't have stormwater or technically don't live within the city limits?
Late agreements, we do sometimes go on calls outside of our city limits.
Right, but those are kind of anomalies, right? I mean, you have you have an agreement like with probably with District 4, City of Walla Walla, whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'm a little bit confused as to using the stormwater as a count basis to come up with, you know, the calculation, I guess, is
Well,
where I'm at.
more important than thinking of it just as a stormwater account, just think of it as the number of accounts with the city.
yeah,
So,
we are.
so option one is trying to identify all the accounts, and I think that 2987 is close. I think it's, if we look at the total number of bills we send out on a monthly basis, I think it's just over 3,000. So the first one is directly related to each person that gets a bill from the city would get a charge of $12.19.
And how much would the commercial accounts get?
Well, that's one. They get $12.19. One account gets one charge. And that's how a number of jurisdictions that have ambulance utility are doing it. And that's the way Walla Walla was going to do it. One account, one charge.
Right.
Not,
And so
not identifying whether it's a multi-unit facility, not identifying if single family or commercial, or it was just one account, one charge.
And so for this purpose, it's being proposed as the other option, right?
Yeah, number two, we've actually modified that, and we just completed that that scenario today, just like half an hour ago.
Right.
Is that we're looking at, okay, well, how do we easily charge commercial? Let's face it, commercial and multi-unit are the big factor, right?
Right.
And also Walla Walla University. The problem with the stormwater account that we identified at the last meeting was that so we're trying to identify an equivalent unit. So we can say, okay, if you're a commercial entity, then how do you charge an ambulance utility as opposed to just having one charge per month at $12.19? There's got to be more associated with that commercial entity. A good idea is Walmart. Would they get a bill of just $12.19? That didn't seem fair to single-family residences, so we came up with the other options. Now, that's the whole point of this, was trying to identify, how do we identify a unit? That will allow us in the billing system to easily identify the unit and charge it consistently across all entities or all customers.
So just out of curiosity, do you guys track how many calls that go to like your large?
They're in number 3 option. You can see that incident count there in the middle section.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at it on a phone, so my apologies.
Oh, yeah, so it's identified. So in 2020, there was 1,429 calls. 84 went to single family, 762 went to multifamily, nursing home 447, commercial 97, and the public schools, it was grouped into schools and public at 39. And there's an allocation there based on that. The problem for us is that's a hard number to, like, how often do you calculate it? We're trying to come up with a system that's more a shared cost amongst all entities as opposed to targeting individual ones, if you follow.
Right.
Because that incident count can change month to month, year to year. So it's more a generalized approach to determining how to charge, and not as little as saying, okay, we have 3,000 accounts, let's just charge everybody what that amount is.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hopefully that answers your question.
One other quick comment, I guess it's pretty obvious that our local firefighters and volunteers have made they filled a big role, and a big ask has been put upon them. And I think it's important that we recognize that and say thank you for all the work that they've done.
Thank you. We will never be able to do this without our volunteers.
So in effect, what's going to council tomorrow night is a similar presentation. It's just that stormwater is taken out, and what we've done in that second unit is we've determined an equivalent unit for commercial, for schools, for Walla Walla University, that determines a unit based on single family square footage.
And the only reason we mentioned stormwater is that's the only database we could actually get addresses from that covered everyone, because there's some areas in town that aren't in our wastewater system. And then our water system doesn't cover everyone because Green Tank and District 14 cover parts of our city. So actually the only complete database of addresses is in stormwater.
But the unit driver wasn't the best method to go by.
So what's the time frame again that council would like to make a decision? Just curious.
Brian? So we're taking this just as a discussion item tomorrow to council, and we're looking at hopefully in the first meeting in January to make a decision. And then we're recommending a phased roll-in, which will be a third in the first year, 2/3 in the second year, and the full amount in the third year.
And I would mention, with it starting with the third sometime in the summer, take into account the budgetary calendars of schools, the university, and such.
So a July 1 implementation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Carlton and Chief Winter. We appreciate you guys very much. Let's move on to our snow and ice policy update by Mr. McAndrews, please.
Okay, he's on a training session, so I'll cover it today. So we just have augmented a new snow control policy, and it is attached. Just saying when and how things will be plowed, and we're doing things a little differently where when it is snowing bad, that we will actually have two folks on at one point in time, because as you may recall in past years, the city, I'll just say, has been heavily criticized for snow response. I'll just couch it that way. So as you can see here, we're trying to be a little more responsive to that. Luckily, with the American Rescue Plan Act grant funds, we were able to get a skid steer, which essentially will act as another snow plow device. And then in our equipment replacement plan, we actually replaced the grader, the old grader from 1976 that was plowing streets. So we have something constructed in this millennia that'll be doing the plowing now. So that is good. And as usual, the priority one streets are what you would think of. So College Avenue, Whitman, Tamarson, all stuff around the schools. And then the second ones are essentially the streets, in essence, that need to be plowed as soon as possible, but aren't like the utmost priority, like Scenic View, Date, the couplet roads and Homestead, so Homestead and Dones, and things like that. So we actually have a game plan in place that we will be implementing this year, and some better equipment. So that is good. I just wanted to update you all on that.
All right, thank you. And do we have any questions or comments on the snow and ice control policy? Okay, well, let's move on to, and I'm not sure what we are moving on to.
The draft conceptual rendering of the light industrial flex building. This is just for review and comment. So take a look at it when you have a moment, and let me know your thoughts on it. Because if it's agreed upon that this in general looks reasonable, the proposal for a light industrial flex building, we will essentially finalize the study that was paid for with the state community economic revitalization board grant. And then we will engage with the Port of the Walla Walla and hopefully making this a reality, because I would remind this commission that in the county itself, we are the only jurisdiction that the port does not have industrial flex space operating in, even within the unincorporated areas. So they have nothing here. Meanwhile, they have stuff out of Burbank, Wallula, out at the airport, and even Waitsburg, but we don't have anything. So that is essentially what we're trying to change, because we do hear that out on the streets, that there is an interest in locating here. However, there is not pre-built space for the light industrial flex sector in town. And I know the port is pretty much 100% occupied out at the airport. So we're just looking for ways to rectify that and keep our stop the brain drain, where right now the students graduating from the university, even when they come up with an idea, there's no space for them to go, and then we lose them to Tri-Cities. So
Okay, any questions or comments from our commissioners on this? All right, if not, let's move on to the Port of Walla Walla stats.
Just including this for your purview. So the port has an Economic Development Assistance Commission meeting every like 2 months. And then they compile basically various charts of statistics for the county. So just to go over a couple of key ones, if you go to page 3, for unemployment, we're actually about the second best county in the whole state. The only county that's beating us is Asotin County, the 2.8, but Walla Walla is only 3. So we're in a good position there. The labor force on page 4, we're holding our own there. And then the interesting stuff really is if you get to retail sales on page 10, looking at as far as our growth, when you look at 2020 to 2021, going from essentially 36th place out of the 39 counties in the state all the way up to 13th place. So we are holding our own there, which is very good. Bank deposits, if you go to page 12, same. We have growth there. And then the median home prices on page 13, as you can see, are very large increases, which is good and bad. I mean, it's good for people who own the real estate. For people trying to move here, though, that's a whole nother story. So those are the statistics I just want to make sure you all have, because that meeting's held in the middle of the day, so I know a lot of you don't have the time to go to it, but you have that now to take a look at your convenience.
All right, thank you, Mike. Let's go on to our, unless there's any questions on that. Let's go on to our tax increment financing, please.
Okay, thank you. So I want you all please look at this over the next 2 months, because this will eventually go to an advisory vote whether or not to move forward with this or not. I mentioned this months ago when the state passed this. This is the economic development tool where essentially for a given area with city property tax, you can essentially do a study where based on several criteria and what you think future development could be in 25 years, you can essentially do grants and bonds against estimated future growth in local property taxes and use it to fund infrastructure to spur development. So Pasco is already starting to do it for their industrial corridor. I included basically just their agenda bill for how they're moving forward with it, and it provides a decent synopsis of where you can go with it. If you go to the downtown Stone Creek TIF PDF, that's a little map of what I'm suggesting we potentially look at. So when you create a TIF district, you can essentially do infrastructure improvements in that area. And the interesting thing with this TIF legislation compared to other states is they actually put a limit on it that each city can only do 2 TIF districts per city. So the recommendation, and if you're all okay with pursuing this idea, which we'll have a vote in February, essentially the idea would be to do like a hybrid Stone Creek downtown TIF, and we would use that to essentially help with doing like a stoplight out by the high school and the new east-west road that would go out there. Likely there's going to be a gap on the reconstruction of Majania Road because the federal infrastructure got dialed back from what was proposed initially by about a third. So there will be a gap there. And then by extending it into downtown, the idea is that we could use some of that money actually build downtown parking lots. So that way on future development, that would essentially allow us to then, as future development comes in, they wouldn't have to build parking if there's already shared parking facilities in the middle of the blocks. So that will allow us to do all of that. So essentially, this is just a draft for one TIF district. We're going to propose that the other one, we just hold out an outer space to see what pops next, whether it be Myra Road on our side, whether it be Martin Airfield. There's a lot of stuff in the air. So considering we only have one more of these allowed, it wouldn't be a wise idea to essentially just use it on something that we aren't sure would bear fruition, and things have to be contiguous as well, which with the remaining projects causes some issues. So this one covers stuff that we think would pop essentially, because these would be good for about 25 years. So this is what we would propose for the first one, but please take a gander at that, because the next meeting we will ask for an advisory vote, and then if you're all good with it, it'll go to council, and if they're good with the concept, then the finance department will start development of that study so we can understand what our increment is, and then how to essentially dole that out for various infrastructure projects to work to essentially get development going, because there are several projects in the hopper where it'll essentially solidify things, and I'll just leave it there.
All right, do we have any questions or comments on the tax increment financing? Okay, let's move on to our traffic box art wrap project, our phase 2.
Okay, thank you. So they were all installed with the exception of one, because we're trying to use some degreaser on a box because it was a little dirty, and we'll get the last art wrap installed. But 6 of the 7 are installed, and they're in various boxes at College Avenue and 8th, College and Rose Damson, Meadowbrook by Walmart, and then Lamperty at large. P1FCU helped cover the traffic box art wraps. So please take a look at them. It definitely adds to the vitality of the business districts.
Yes, I know. I, for one, am very impressed with them. I think they look wonderful. And yeah, definitely take a look at them when you are out and about. Any comments on that? Okay, let's move on to our development tracking sheet for December of 2021.
Okay, thank you. So still quite a bit going on here. So still talking with the chocolate folks about Meadowbrook. One thing that did leave the area, and it wasn't anything due local, but it's because they're doing a nationwide restructuring. And unfortunately, you're starting to see this like with the larger commercial banking players is Chase Bank. They did close their branch over at Meadowbrook, and they're just functioning essentially out of their branch in downtown Walla Walla. That was due to a nationwide restructuring effort on their part. They are starting to market the building as they do directly own that over the Meadowbrook and State Route 125. Project HM, they're working on editing their plans. Project FM is contingent on the sewer wrapping up, which we are working on. The Burger King, they are planning for a spring groundbreaking, and that will definitely move quick, I would suspect. Project W, that's on hold as stuff from COVID just resettles. And then Project D, that is contingent on the Myra and 125 roundabout happening. So we get our left turn lane in Commercial Drive, but we do still talk with them. So they have an interest in our area, which is good. And then Project Flight, we are continuing to try to schedule a meeting with Mr. Corliss to just understand the future, because we've heard a lot of rumblings of it being more of like a general mixed use smorgasbord with the airport, and then some maybe light industrial supporting features and residential in the back, but we're still trying to understand that as you have to scale the public utility infrastructure appropriately and meet that. And then Goodwill, they are moving good. So the foundation's being poured, and they are staying within their project schedule. Project Medical, that is likely another medical clinic looking at Commercial Drive. And essentially we're going back and forth with them about some very early level plans, but they do have an interest in locating here. On the residential side, Homestead, they have turned in some initial draft plans for their Y-size structures, which is affordable housing off of Dones. So we are reviewing that. Villages of Fort Walla Walla, we did receive correspondence from the developer last week off of Whitman Drive, and they are saying that it will be built in fiscal year 2022, and they still own the property. So based on the data we have, we believe it still is an ongoing concern. Country Estates, there's still working with them on edits to plans for some additional manufactured housing. Page 9, Sermon Development. That's an apartment complex cross street from Wenzel Nursery. They've already been permitted for one multifamily structure. We're just essentially awaiting responses on comments for the other complex, because there would be 2 apartment complexes essentially going on that block. Page 10, Stone Creek Development. We're just promoting the site to development community. There is interest. We continue to aid in those endeavors. Hamby, the building construction continues up on top of the hill on College and 13th. Some other interesting stuff on page 11, which is some newer developments. Villages at Garrison Creek. That donut hole in the middle of the development that has been an empty field, we actually have gotten plans for that. So we're working through that with the developer, but the proposal is for an additional 72 homes in that donut hole in the Villages of Garrison Creek development. So that would actually complete that subdivision. Project Bell is the 8th and College site. They are in a due diligence period with a developer out of Seattle to do a mixed use structure at that corner property. Project Kelly is the Mark Neary property. That is being developed by Jeff Kelly to do some townhomes. And then Whispering Creek, they continue to build structures there, but that is the development activity. That is all
right.
his questions.
Any comments or questions? All right. Well, let's move on to our action agenda for our meeting, for our board meeting for January. And it looks like we are going to need to cancel that meeting until our February meeting.
Yes, because the January meeting is the 3rd, and the January meeting is the 3rd. So with that, it would just be to cancel it, just because that'll be the tail end of winter break, and certain folks will be heading back here. So it is needed.
Well, that makes sense to me, and then we can be prepared to go to work in February. Do I have a motion to cancel the January 2022 meeting?
I move that we cancel the meeting in January.
All right, and a second? Did I get a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
I
second that.
second.
Okay, and all in favor say aye.
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 All right. That should close our meeting. Let's adjourn this. And do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, do I have a second on that, please?
Second.
All right, and all in favor say aye.
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 All right,
Aye.
aye. Thank you so much. And everybody have a good rest of your evening.
See you in February.
Sounds good.